Now we'll talk about number 2. Okay.
Good afternoon, Larry Jarvis. With the second item before you, there is kind of a bonus feature in addition to preserving 2 historic homes that would otherwise be demolished. There is an opportunity here to provide for some affordable living downtown that is targeting service workers. That is in 2 buildings. One of the homes would have at least 3 studio apartments. The other building would have a duplex and would be improved for what's called co-housing, which is something that has started on the West Coast and hopefully will arrive to Raleigh. Matt Tomasulo does have a brief presentation on the co-housing model, and I think you'd find it interesting.
Good afternoon, Mayor and councilors. Thank you for this opportunity.
Looking for it on the desktop. That might be.
Is that it? Doesn't look like it.
It's your PowerPoint, but
Yeah.
it's not a PowerPoint. It's not as a PDF because it was too big.
It's not that one that you sent it via email?
Yeah, to council presentation. It's a PDF, not a PowerPoint.
Let's see here. Who sent it?
Judy.
She didn't send it. It's not here.
Okay.
I'm happy to share a little bit about it without the presentation
So I have a question.
or answer questions. Yeah.
That would be great, Matt. There's a couple of things here I didn't quite understand. So it looks here the duplex structure to move to 502 South Bloodworth will be renovated for 8 residents. My question to you is, I don't necessarily understand if I know what co-living means. When I look at it online, it looks like group homes. Can you explain the difference, or are they the same?
So it's a shared, community-focused kind of living space, and the duplex has 2 4-unit, 4-bedroom units, and co-living, which a lot of the presentation would have given some background as to where it's coming from, but some high-level data that is kind of restructuring the way that millennials are living is that we are owning houses much later in life. We are getting married much later in life. And right now, some of the stats that I had in the presentation, some were from Bloomberg, where adults between the ages of 18 and 34, 88% of them live with a roommate. And what is now emerging on the West Coast and in New England is a way that you can have a more community-focused kind of residential house or community where you can live, and you have less personal space and more public space. So the way that this is different than, say, boarding houses is that you actually sign leases, you have more of a flat earn efficiency, and then you have much more robust common space. There's a lot of programming involved. There's an on-site manager, and I understand a lot of this can't be, written into the way that it's zoned, but it is a focus on community. It is a focus on a little bit more of this collaborative lifestyle. A lot of it's bridged out of the shared workspace community as well, where you have shared resources among more people who are utilizing less personal space. And what it allows for much lower cost of living, and it allows for more communal living, particularly in the on-ramp or off-ramp to single-family housing. So personally, I've taken a big interest in this because I lived in Denmark for a while, and I was studying architecture there and urban planning, and all of my friends who were Danes, who were in their mid to late 20s, lived in something called a collegium. And what it was a 200 or 250 square foot little efficiency or flat that had a little living space. They had their own bathroom. They maybe had a refrigerator, but they were on a hall, and it was anywhere from 4 to 8 to 12 people shared some common spaces. And typically there was some like a community manager of sorts who was there. And now it is becoming something, it is becoming an approach and a solution to more kind of urban located housing, particularly for the creative class, for service workers, and people who cannot afford a house, cannot afford to live by themselves. A lot of times it is targeted at millennials right now because they are early adopters, they're used to technology running everything, they're used to sharing everything, and it makes for an easy lift. Personally, I'm really interested in it as it evolves, which it certainly is in a lot of other markets, to where it starts to help facilitate later on in life community living. It's something that over in Denmark, also a lot of 60, 70, and 80-year-olds all lived together, and they had supportive community management, and they had shared spaces, and had very small personal spaces. And for me, I see it as an interesting evolution for Raleigh to explore, and I do believe that there's a significant market for it. I've polled a good bit of service workers in downtown, and an overwhelming percentage of them pay more than I would be planning to charge, and also live with roommates in relatively similar square footage. But a lot of them are kind of grandfathered in, less than adequate houses, or they're historic houses that you couldn't really do that in anymore.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. The other question I have is, I don't know if this is a Larry question or a Matt question, so I'll just ask it, and whoever's appropriate can answer it. So currently, it appears that the city of Raleigh owns the property?
Correct.
Okay, and the city of Raleigh is going to sell it to PNC?
Correct.
And then you're going to buy it from PNC?
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that this is the way that the transfer of public property for preservation purposes occurs. And so the city would sell it to Preservation North Carolina. Preservation North Carolina would then put restrictive covenants on it.
Preservation easement.
Excuse me?
Preservation easement.
Yeah, and an easement, which means that it would be there forever, or at least until PNC decided to do something with it, because they actually have a first right of refusal as well.
Okay, so at the end of the day, who owns the property?
So the city sells it. I own it at the end of the day.
Okay, so that's what I'm asking. I'm just trying to understand this process.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we own it now.
Yep.
We're going to sell it to PNC. You're going to buy it from PNC?
Correct, with covenants and easements on it.
So I understand this. Is there a time frame that which all this happens, or does it happen consecutively? I don't understand this, so I'm trying to understand how we're doing this.
Sure. Typically, the transfer from the city to Preservation North Carolina, and then the transfer from Preservation North Carolina to the end user happens at the same time. Usually the cases that you see that come through here, such as 314 Haywood Street, there's not always an end user already in mind. A case where that did happen was on New Bern Avenue when a house was moved, I think last year, that Capital Area Preservation owned, and they sold it. But yes, usually that transaction happens simultaneously, goes through Preservation North Carolina in order to capture the preservation easements, and usually there's also a rehabilitation agreement that goes along with it, that they have to get the houses up to a certain point, and then it sells to the end user. Does that
Thank
answer
you.
your question?
So
At what price does it sell?
That's a very good question. Always for the cost of the lot, plus Preservation North Carolina typically adds on the cost for the maintenance of the easement, and I think the last I heard that adds on about $7,000 or so.
So can you tell me the exact dollar amount?
I think they were in
In
the memo.
yeah.
Let me check that.
the total proposed sales value is $153,310.
So for the Mr. City Attorney, Mr. McCormick, did anyone else have an opportunity to purchase this property?
Well, anybody could have come and made a proposal to purchase the property, and this is an offer. This is one of the rare situations in which the city can sell real estate without public bid. It has to be to a nonprofit. You could not sell it directly to Mr. Tomasulo because he's a city official, because he's on the Planning Commission. But in this case, you were selling it to Preservation North Carolina, which you're allowed to do without a bid. And the price, apparently, I'm sure Tanya has assured everyone that that's within sort of what the market is for that property. And then it is kind of unusual for the exchanges to be made simultaneously. Normally PNC, and we do these deals with them before, normally they get them and then they find someone to buy the property, so they don't normally occur simultaneously.
Well, right, PNC will have an option on it, and then the sale goes through at the same time.
So I'm going to say this, it doesn't appear that there's anything illegal here, but I will say that in a public perception, it doesn't look good for me to see this deal being made with a sitting planning commissioner. I just don't think from a public perspective, it doesn't look clean as it could. That's just my personal opinion. Thank you.
So I've got a couple questions. Matt, where are you getting the historic homes from?
I forgot to add that. That's the whole
Because I
reason.
think it may not be clear that you're buying.
That was the whole reason that I'm here.
Lots.
It's not just to buy lots.
Right.
It is
to preserve
there
historic
is
buildings,
a
right?
redevelopment project just south of the train station, and on in between Southwest Street and Harrington Street, and those two houses, as well as another structure there, were going to be torn down. And I approached the developers. It's the historic Fourth Ward. It was historically an African American neighborhood. The houses are fit impeccably well into the Prince Hall neighborhood and the South Park neighborhood. So I more so was acting as a curious kind of resident and neighbor, and was like, would you guys be willing, if I could convince a lot of different people, to preserve these houses, would you, and I go talk to a house mover and everything else, would you be, is this something that would be feasible to preserve these two houses, because there's so few houses that are remaining that could, help infill in the Prince Hall area that fit it so well.
So just out of curiosity, I mean, my son has been a big user of co-housing in San Francisco, Vancouver, Osaka, so I know the type well. But I've never really thought of this before. How is it different than a boarding house or a rooming house?
A lot of it is that, you're signing a lease and you're living there more so on an apartment relationship versus a room by the week or room by the month relationship. It also has a solid management structure. There's most likely on-site management as well. Open Door, who is the management company actually out of Oakland, that he's from the Triangle. He went to UNC. That's how I even got to know about this. They have a lot of interesting amenities that help with the community.
What zoning category would this use fall under?
Excuse me?
What zoning category? What zoning district would this fall under?
It's in DX. It's a historically mixed-use neighborhood. It is a few blocks from a lot of the different restaurants and bars. So.
Okay. Last question.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that this will be equal opportunity. You've talked about millennials, but
Follow every single fair
could be
housing law possible.
any
Yep.
age, any ethnicity, any gender.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Do I have I'm still going to make a motion to approve this. I think this is exactly the kind of thing we need to be doing to provide more affordable housing. Plus, we get to save some historic homes. So, I don't know.
Not opposed to the use.
Okay, so we have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
I'd like to,
Aye.
I'd
Sorry.
like to make a comment before the vote, Mayor. I kind of piggyback Ms. Crowder's comments because, man, nothing against you. It's just, it doesn't really pass to me, the sniff test here, because you're using that or nonprofit as a conduit for someone to get it, and it's just a pass-through. So I just don't think it's proper to me, so I'm going to vote against it.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay.
It was,
You will need a show of hands on that one?
I think I've got 3 noes.
And who are the
And there's
three
only
Who
noes?
are the 3
7 of
noes?
them.
Right here.
One, two,
Oh, wait a minute.
three.
Well, that's unfortunate. I hope there's some way we can reconsider it, especially given the amount of discussion that this council has had about affordable housing. This was mentioned earlier. This fits into exactly what we've been saying that we want to do. Save historic structures, provide more affordable options in an area where we have a lot of service workers. I understand your concerns, Mr. Thompson, but he is not a paid member of, he receives no compensation for the city for the work he does. It's all volunteer. Without the Preservation North Carolina, we would not be able to put those restrictive covenants that would help to maintain that historic, exactly what we keep asking for over and over and over every time we review Historic Development Commission, every time we do it. So either we're want to come through and do the things we say we want to do, or it's lip service. And that's my comment.
Yeah, I hope everybody can take a hard look at this and get comfortable with it, given all the dynamics involved and all the things the mayor stated. Also, we absolutely don't want to disincentivize people to get engaged with their city and to serve the citizens by being on the planning commission. And so, I feel like we should be rewarding that, not punishing it, but hopefully the council can get comfortable with the proposal and vote for it in a
Hope you
future
find
meeting.
another way to bring it back.
What, can I just, I think Mr. Thompson's comment was really separated planning commission service versus whether there was a competitive bid on city sale of property. That to me sounds like that was your central concern.
And I wasn't trying to address anyone directly. It was brought up, and so I just want to make that comment. I think everybody supports that. I'm not indicating otherwise.
Mayor,
Yes.
may I ask a question? What happens to these homes now? I mean, one of the reasons for doing this was to avoid demolition. When is that demolition scheduled to take place? And are we in a position of now losing this opportunity to save historic properties that would actually fit into these historic districts?
It's the next few months, they're going to come down. So it's a matter of weeks, probably.
Just a minute. Thanks. Your attorney?
Well, I was just going to remind the council that this is not like a zoning case. There's no time limit on bringing it back. So if you want to have some additional verification, and if Larry and these folks want to come back on another agenda, they can do that. There's no time limit or no limit on the number of times you can make the request.
Okay. Thank
Mayor?
you. Yes.
Just one other thing. Since this is my last meeting, I won't have the opportunity to look at this again. I want to compliment Mr. Tomasulo for bringing forward innovative and new ideas to the city, starting with Walk Your City, which we had to create a whole pilot program to allow that. But Matt has really been at the forefront of bringing our city forward and moving our city forward. And I just want to say thank you for that. And please continue to do what you've been doing.
Mayor, before we go forward, I need clarification on the no votes. Was there 3 or 4?
3.
Okay.
Okay,
It would have been.
moved forward to requests.
Stephenson and Cox.
Requests and petitions of citizens. First, we have Mr. Durward Baker,
And I think the no's were,
Mr.
Those
Thompson.
were Thompson, Stevenson, and Cox.
Yeah,
No.
no,
No, Crowder.
Crowder and Cox.
Well, that's why I was confused.